The bench in the afternoon sun, the park looked ordinary to everyone else. Children ran barefoot across the grass, their laughter drifting through the warm afternoon air. Parents sat in loose circles, scrolling on their phones or calling out warnings that went mostly ignored. Leaves rustled softly overhead, sunlight breaking through in scattered gold patterns on the ground. But on the far side of the park, near an old wooden bench with chipped paint and loose screws, something quiet and powerful was unfolding. Ethan hadn't always been the man people avoided once. He had worn pressed shirts and polished shoes. Once, people greeted him by name, asked for advice, laughed at his jokes. Once he had believed life followed rules. Work hard, be kind, and things would work out. Life, however, had rewritten those rules without warning. Now he sat hunched forward on the bench, elbows on his knees, fingers loosely clasped together. His hair had grown longer than he liked, curling around his ears and brushing his collar. His beard, once neatly trimmed, had become a shield, something to hide behind. His flannel shirt was clean, but old, its fabric thinned by time and too many washes. Most people passed him without a second glance. Some noticed him and looked away quickly, pretending they hadn't. Others tightened their grip on their bags or subtly changed direction. Ethan had grown used to it, the invisible wall people built the moment they decided who he was. A problem. A failure. A man who had messed up his own life. He told himself it didn't hurt anymore. That was a lie. A few steps away, a little girl stood perfectly still. Her name was Amara. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old. Her small brown dress swayed slightly in the breeze, and her hair was pulled back into a puff that bounced whenever she moved. She watched Ethan with wide, thoughtful eyes that hadn't yet learned the art of looking away. She had been playing near the slide, and she noticed him. At first, he was just another adult sitting alone. But then she saw the way his shoulders curved inward, as if he were trying to fold himself into something smaller. She saw the way he stared at his hands, unmoving, like he was waiting for something he didn't expect to arrive. Amara walked closer. Each step was careful, deliberate, like she was approaching a fragile thing that might disappear if startled. Ethan noticed her shadow before he noticed her face. He looked up, ready to offer the practiced half-smile adults use to reassure children and their parents. But there was no parent hurrying over, no warning shout, just the little girl standing there, close enough now that he could see the tiny scuff, marks on her shoes. She held something in her hand. A folded piece of paper. Ethan's chest tightened. He had seen that look before, the curious pause, the hesitation, the moment before a child asked an uncomfortable question. He straightened slightly, unsure whether to speak first. "Hi," he said quietly. Amara didn't answer right away. She looked at his face, then at his hands, then back at his eyes, as if she were measuring something invisible. Finally, she stepped forward and held out the folded paper. "For you," she said. Her voice was soft but certain. Ethan blinked. "For me?" She nodded. He hesitated, unsure if this was some kind of game or if a parent would appear any second to scold them both. Slowly, carefully, he reached out and took it from her fingers. It was warm from her hand. Inside the fold was a small bill, creased, clearly handled many times before. Not much money, but enough to mean something to a child. Ethan swallowed. "You don't have to do this," he said gently. "You should keep it." Amara shook her head again, more firmly this time. "My mama says if you see someone sad, you help if you can." The words landed heavier than she could possibly know. Ethan felt something crack just slightly inside his chest. Around them, the park continued as usual. Laughter, shouts, the squeak of swings. No one noticed the moment, and yet it felt like the world had narrowed down to the space between a man on a bench and a child who refused to look away. Ethan nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough. Amara smiled. Not a big smile, not one asking for praise. Just a small, satisfied smile. Then she turned and ran back toward the playground, her dress fluttering behind her. Ethan sat there long after she was gone, the folded bill resting in his palm. He didn't know it yet, but that small act, so easy for a child, so rare for an adult, was the first crack in a wall that had taken years to build, and sometimes that's all it takes. Asterisk the things people don't see. Ethan stayed on the bench long after the sun began to dip lower in the sky. The folded bill rested in his palm, untouched, like it might vanish if he looked at it too closely. He kept replaying the moment in his mind, the girl's steady voice, the way she hadn't flinched, the calm certainty in her eyes. There had been no pity in her expression, no fear, just recognition. Someone had seen him. He closed his fingers around the money, not out of need, but to anchor himself to the feeling. It had been months, maybe longer, since anyone had spoken to him without an edge of suspicion or forced politeness. He stood slowly, joints stiff from hours of sitting, and slipped the bill into his pocket, not to spend it. It felt wrong somehow, like spending it would erase what it represented. As he walked toward the park's exit, he noticed the subtle shifts in people's behavior again, the half step away, the guarded glances, the unspoken assumptions. Nothing had changed except him, across the park. Amara's mother watched her daughter climb the steps of the slide. Blissfully unaware of the quiet storm she had set in motion, Lena had seen the interaction from a distance at first. Her heart had jumped into her throat. A strange man. No context. No warning. Every instinct had told her to run over immediately. But then she saw Amara's posture, calm, confident, unafraid. She saw the way the man's face softened, like something heavy had been lifted. Just for a moment, Lena didn't interrupt. Now, as Amara slid down laughing, Lena's eyes drifted toward the bench. The man was gone. She felt an odd pull in her chest, a mixture of relief and curiosity. "What did you give him?" she asked later as they sat on a blanket sharing apple slices. "My helping money," Amara said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Helping money?" Amara nodded. For when someone looks lonely, Lena smiled, but her throat tightened. She had taught her daughter about kindness in theory. Share your toys, say thank you, be polite. She hadn't expected her to practice it so boldly, so unfiltered. "You did a good thing," Lena said quietly. Amara beamed. "I know." Ethan didn't go far. He ended up a few blocks away. Outside a small corner cafe he had passed dozens of times, but never entered. Through the window, he saw people laughing over coffee, laptops open, lives unfolding in ordinary ways. He almost kept walking instead. He stopped. The bell over the door chimed softly as he stepped inside. The smell of fresh bread and roasted coffee wrapped around him, unfamiliar and comforting. Conversations paused for just a fraction of a second, long enough for him to feel the weight of judgment settle on his shoulders, then resumed. The barista, a young man with tired eyes and a kind voice, looked up. "Hey, what can I get you?" Ethan hesitated. He reached into his pocket and felt the folded bill. His fingers tightened around it. He unfolded it slowly, smoothing it on the counter. "Just a coffee," he said. "Black." The barista nodded without comment. No raised eyebrow, no sigh. "No, look," that said, "hurry up." Ethan exhaled as he sat by the window. Warming his hands around the cup, he noticed something strange. People were looking at him, but differently. Not as a fixture to avoid, but as a man sitting in a cafe. Doing exactly what everyone else was doing, blending in. It shouldn't have mattered. But it did. And with the warmth of the coffee came memories he hadn't let himself touch in a long time, the job he had lost when the company folded overnight, the savings that vanished faster than he expected, the pride that kept him from asking for help, the silence of friends who didn't know what. Toussaint eventually stopped trying. He had told himself he was invisible because he deserved to be. A little girl had just proven him wrong. That evening, as the sky deepened into shades of purple and blue, Ethan returned to the bench. Not to sit, to leave something behind. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small notebook and a pen, the last remnants of the life he used to have. He tore out a page and wrote carefully, deliberately, as if the words mattered. Because they did. "Thank you for seeing me. I won't forget it. He folded the note and tucked it between the slats of the bench where the girl had stood. Then he walked away, not knowing if she would ever read it, but knowing that, for the first time in a long while, he wanted to be the kind of person worth seeing. When kindness comes back around the next afternoon, the park felt different to Ethan. Nothing had changed. The same benches, same trees, the same distant laughter, but something inside him had shifted. He walked with a little more purpose, his shoulders not quite as hunched as before. The notebook was tucked under his arm, the pen clipped neatly at the top. He hadn't come back for the girl. He told himself that. Still, his eyes drifted toward the bench without meaning to. The folded note was gone. For a moment, sharp disappointment cut through him. Maybe a groundskeeper had tossed it. Maybe it had fallen and been carried away by the wind. He stood there, staring at the empty space between the wooden slats, feeling foolish for caring so much. Then he noticed something else. A small piece of paper lay on the seat of the bench. Weighted down by a pebble, his breath caught. He sat down slowly and picked it up. The handwriting was uneven, the letters large and carefully formed, as if each one had taken real effort. "My mama read your note. She said, 'Thank you, too. I hope you are happy today.'" Ethan stared at the words until they blurred. He hadn't realized how much he needed to hear that how deeply the simple hope for his happiness would land. He pressed the note to his chest, feeling the familiar tightening behind his eyes. He laughed softly, shaking his head. "You did it again, kid," he murmured. Across the park, Lena watched him read the note. She had found Ethan's message that morning when Amara ran ahead to the bench. Excited to show her where the sad man had been sitting, Lena had read it twice, then a third time, her heart aching in a way she couldn't explain. Somewhere between making lunch and braiding Amara's hair, she'd made a decision. Now she watched as Ethan stood, looking around uncertainly. Clearly searching for something or someone, Lena took a breath and walked over. "Hi," she said. Ethan looked up, startled. For a split second, his face carried that familiar guarded expression, the one that came from too many assumptions and too much judgment. Then it softened. "Hi," he replied. "I'm Amara's mom," Lena said, gesturing toward the playground. "She found your note." Ethan nodded, suddenly unsure what to do with his hands. "I wasn't sure if... I didn't know if it would be okay. It was more than okay," Lena said gently. "You made her day. You made mine too." They stood there in an awkward, honest silence, two adults unsure how to bridge the space between their worlds. Finally, Lena spoke again. "Do you come here often?" Ethan smiled faintly. "More than I used to. Less than I probably should." She smiled back, recognizing the careful humor of someone who'd learned how to survive by downplaying pain. Amara ran over then, her face lighting up when she saw him. "You read it?" "I did," Ethan said. "I liked it very much." She nodded seriously. "Mama helped with the spelling." "That makes it a team effort," he said. "The best kind." Mara beamed. They sat together on the bench, not too close, not too far apart. Lena didn't ask Ethan why he was there every day. She didn't ask what he did for work or where he lived. Instead, she asked about the notebook under his arm. "What do you write?" She asked. Ethan hesitated, then answered honestly. "I used to be an engineer. I write ideas, plans, sometimes just thoughts so they don't get too loud in my head." Lena raised her eyebrows slightly. "An engineer?" Former Ethan said quickly. "Long story." She studied him for a moment, not with suspicion, but curiosity. "My company's always looking for people who can think in systems, especially ones who don't panic when things fall apart." Ethan laughed under his breath. "I've had plenty of practice with things falling apart." "I'm serious," she said. "No promises. But if you'd like, I could look at your resume." The word hit him like a physical force. Resume a future tense word. "I don't even know where to start," said quietly. Lena smiled. "Start with coffee. We can figure out the rest later." Asterisk the day the world shifted. Ethan hadn't slept much the night before, not because he was cold or hungry. He'd known nights far worse, but because his mind wouldn't stop moving. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Amara's careful handwriting. Heard Lena's voice offering coffee like it was the most natural thing in the world. Start with coffee, such a small sentence, such a dangerous one. Hope had a way of hurting if you held it too tightly still. When morning came, Ethan washed his face in the public restroom near the park, smoothed his hair as best he could, and put on the cleanest shirt he owned. He studied his reflection for a long moment. "You can do this," he told himself quietly. "Just coffee." The cafe was brighter in the morning. Sunlight poured through the windows, illuminating dust motes that drifted lazily in the air. The smell of fresh pastries filled the room. Ethan arrived early, nerves buzzing under his skin, and chose a small table near the back. When Lena walked in with Amara, 10 minutes later, something in his chest loosened. "Hi," Amara called out, spotting him immediately. Ethan stood, suddenly unsure if he should shake hands, wave, or do nothing at all. Lena solved the problem with a warm smile and a nod. "Thank you for meeting us," she said. "Thank you for asking," he replied. They ordered coffee and juice, and for a few minutes, conversation flowed as Amara explaining her favorite animals, Lena laughing. Ethan listening more than he spoke. Then Lena reached into her bag, pulled out a folder. Ethan's stomach tightened. "I don't want to overwhelm you," she said, sensing it immediately. "So let's take this slow. You told me you were an engineer. What kind?" "Structural," Ethan said. "Mostly infrastructure projects, bridges, public works, things meant to last." Lena nodded thoughtfully. "That explains a lot." "Explains what?" "Why you look like someone who thinks about consequences," she said simply. Ethan didn't know how to respond to that. She slid a piece of paper across the table. It wasn't a job offer. It wasn't a contract. It was a list of community organizations. Workforce reentry programs. A local firm that partnered with nonprofits, names, phone numbers. "I don't know your whole story," Lena said. "And you don't owe it to me. But I do know this: people fall through cracks because systems forget they're human. And sometimes the best people to fix. Those systems are the ones who've been hurt by them." Ethan stared at the paper. No one had spoken about him like that in years. "I don't know if I'm ready," he admitted. Lena smiled gently. "You don't have to be ready for everything. Just the next step." Later that afternoon, Ethan found himself standing outside an office building downtown. It wasn't large or impressive, just brick and glass with a small sign near the door. He stood there longer than necessary, his reflection staring back at him. He thought of bridges he had helped design, how every one of them began with calculations, with faith in materials, with trust that unseen forces would hold. Finally, he opened the door. Back at the park, Amara sat beside her mother on the bench, swinging her legs. "Do you think he's scared?" she asked. Lena smiled. "Probably. Is that okay?" "It's more than okay," Lena said. "It means something matters." Amara nodded, satisfied. "I hope he builds something again." Lena followed her daughter's gaze toward the empty bench, her heart quietly full. That evening, Ethan returned to the park. He sat on the bench where it had all begun, the folder resting beside him. He hadn't gotten a job, not yet, but he had spoken to people who looked him in the eye, people who listened, people who didn't see him as broken, as the sun dipped below the trees. Ethan took out his notebook and wrote one sentence. What last months later, the bench was still there. The paint had chipped a little more, and the wood creaked when someone sat down too quickly. The park looked the same to anyone passing through, ordinary, unremarkable, easy to overlook. But to Ethan, it was sacred ground. He stood a short distance away, watching as Amara chased pigeons across the grass, her laughter bright and fearless. Lena sat on the bench now, a paper coffee cup in one hand, waving when she noticed him. Ethan walked over, smiling. He looked different. His hair was shorter, his beard trimmed. His clothes still simple, but clean and well-fitted. There was a quiet steadiness in the way he moved, a man, no longer bracing for the world to turn its back on him. "How's the bridge?" Lena asked. Ethan chuckled, still standing, which, in my line of work, is the highest compliment. He had started as a contractor temporary, cautious, nothing guaranteed. But his experience, his patience, and his insistence on designing things that served everyone had set him apart. The project wasn't glamorous. A pedestrian bridge connecting to neighborhoods, long divided by a highway. But it mattered. "It's almost done," he said. "Next week, actually." Lena smiled. "I'm proud of you." Ethan paused. The words still felt heavy in the best way. "That means more than you know." A few days later, the city gathered for the opening. There were no speeches from politicians eager for applause, no ribbons meant only for photographs. Just community members, families, elders, children standing together as the sun rose over concrete and steel. Ethan stood near the back, hands clasped, content to remain unseen, until he felt a small hand slip into his. Amara looked up at him. "Mama says you made this." He shook his head gently. "A lot of people made it." She frowned thoughtfully, then nodded. "But you helped, yes," he said softly. "I helped." Lena watched them from a few steps away, her eyes shining. When the first people crossed the bridge, there was no applause, just footsteps, ordinary steady footsteps. Ethan felt his throat tighten. He remembered the day he had sat on a bench believing his life was over. He remembered the folded bill in his hand, the note written in careful letters, the invitation that had felt impossible to accept. All of it had led here. Later that afternoon, Ethan returned to the park one last time before heading home. He sat on the bench and took out his notebook. This time, he didn't write about survival or fear or doubt. He wrote about gratitude, about how kindness doesn't announce itself, about how dignity can be restored in a moment, about how the smallest hands can move the heaviest walls. He tore out the page and tucked it between the slats. "This bench changed my life. If you're sitting here wondering if you matter, you do." As he stood to leave, Amara ran back toward the playground, and Lena walked beside him toward the path. "Thank you," Ethan said, stopping, "for trusting me when you didn't have to." Lena smiled. "Thank you for believing us when it would have been easier not to." They parted ways there, no dramatic goodbyes, no promises the future couldn't keep. Just understanding that evening, as the park emptied and the sky faded into quiet blues, a man sat down on the bench. He looked tired, invisible, uncertain. His eyes caught the folded note between the slats. He read it slowly, and somewhere nearby, a child laughed. Because kindness